Shout out to socraticmethod.net, good website with lots of information. Any mistakes in here are my own. I hope to describe a little how Dell has been using this to take to the streets in his own particular flavour, by providing a little bit of the background of the whole method and incorporating the examples that Dell uses. So for all the people behind the imaginary curve, the ultimate goal here is to increase your knowledge through inquiry, and help others to understand that inquiry is the correct way to increase knowledge, and not taking in things that people just tell you. So with that said, this main quote up here, "The only person who cannot think is the one who thinks he already knows." I hope the meaning of that is clear to everybody. Obviously, if somebody thinks he already knows everything, then he's not likely to question or ask further. And that seems to be a state of mind that is prevalent in today's society, with the education system that promotes it. So a little bit about the history. I'm not going to go into too much detail about this. People can look it up. Socrates was obviously the guy the name's attributed to. Plato, others, more of these ancient philosophers have used this method, but it doesn't seem to be used at all anymore. I've found a couple of examples for education and for law school, but very, very minimal. I think it's hardly present in any education study or method in any of the schools that at least I attended, or any of the institutes that I attended. There doesn't seem to be any particular method that's promoted or used, and I think we all know that question tends not to be tolerated in schools. It's more about listening and regurgitating. Interestingly enough, law schools do use the Socratic method in a certain flavour. It's not a gentle thing apparently for them, because it's supposed to prepare them for the hard litigations and arguments in courts and in trials, and also very particularly applicable to contract law. So not very many examples out there of people using this. Now, I think it's fairly clear that that if you don't question your own convictions, you can't be thoughtful in any particular way. Because if you're not thinking about what you know and not questioning what you know, then you're not really being thoughtful. And there's lots of hurdles by not doing this, by having convictions that are not questioned, or you don't understand where they come from. They tend to blind us. We become very opinionated. It blocks any further inquiry, and basically we get comfortable and stagnate. And there's, how should I say, in that comfortableness there is obviously no fear, which I think is one of the reasons why a lot of people stay in that comfort zone. But generally speaking, the results are that our convictions are unacknowledged, unattended, unquestioned. They dominate our mind. We don't look left and right to see other things. Thoughtfulness becomes a danger to the status quo, to your own status quo, so you tend to try and avoid it. And basically, your thoughts become a slave to fear, in that you don't like to question things anymore, or question your own convictions. So with that little bit of background, let's have a look at some of the flavours that come with the Socratic method. There's the old called classic, which is a kind of two-phase freestyle. I'll go into that in a second. And then there's the more modern version. Just let me go into this more modern version, because just to explain, it's not necessarily modern because it's new, but it's just because it's more popular. There's a couple of good examples online, Meno and the geometry, explaining Pythagoras basically to a slave is a very good example. It tends to be slightly more constructive or easier and causes less discomfort for people. And generally speaking, all of these methods are a questioning that's supposed to lead a person to a certain knowledge through certain small steps that he takes. In the modern version, the answers are generally known in advance, so the questioner has those questions prepared, and the cycle of steps that would lead a respondent to realizing the answer to the question. The modern version, I think, is definitely applicable, but I do prefer the classic two-style or two-phase freestyle version. Just let me go into that. The classic two-phase freestyle version has different phases, the so-called destructive phase and the constructive phase. And it's generally geared around the fact that outcomes are not necessarily known in advance. So when speaking to somebody and posing questions, it could well be that the questioner also learns from the respondents. So the questions can be open or closed. There's no guarantee of a correct answer. But what it does do is it helps the people involved understand what they don't know, and to dig deeper to find out what the answers to these questions are. So it generally starts with a primary question, and then with the answer to the primary question, supplementary questions are used that basically show contradictions, examples or counterexamples, absurdities, paradoxes. And by bringing these other questions into it, people's answers to them, they recognize themselves where these absurdities lie, and then using these supplementary questions, you cycle back to the primary question to see whether something has changed in the mindset and in the thoughts or beliefs of the respondent. So the general guide to these things is that no claims are made. This is not about saying we have an answer to something. It's a series of short questions. The idea being more to dismantle a pre-existing belief, and to have people reassess the question that's being posed to them, the primary question. And it's important also to make sure that first principles or first basic things need to be agreed upon, so that how should I say, no advance can be brought to the table unless people actually get past this first base, these first hurdles. It can be sometimes such that they feel that they're attempting to answer an unanswerable question, and then it's important for the questioner to assist, if you like, the respondent in getting him to work around that and come to terms and get more realization. We're basically trying to find out if the respondents, if these are false phantoms and ideas and things in the head they're chasing, or is there, real truth in the questions that are being asked. So if we go a little bit more in detail into the different phases here, so for example, the destructive phase. The destructive phase is about getting somebody to basically restate their answers to questions that they have at the beginning, using their own words and their own thoughts in this case, instead of the thoughts that have maybe been implanted. And it is destructive in that they know afterwards that they are less sure about what they know with absolute certainty. So, their convictions are questioned. The results and effects can be quite, how should I say, difficult for people. So if there's a failure to find an answer to the primary question, then it immediately produces a kind of ignorance or a realization of ignorance, which is the so-called Socratic effect. But the idea is that it inspires people to think with a new freedom, in that their beliefs are being discarded. So people can react to it in different ways. They can inspire to be better and have more vigorous thinking and have more focus and attention on what they previously ignored. Or they can get discouraged because you're challenging a belief. And that very much depends on what state the people are in their own journey. The constructive phase is then, if you like, to build the people back up from this, how should I say, discardment of beliefs, so that they see that they're building their knowledge actually on logic. They're not afraid to admit they don't know. They understand how beliefs are formed. And a very big part is to make sure that they're not inhibited, that they're not timid, they're not fearful about letting go of beliefs and of questioning their own thoughts. So with that more theoretical part finished, let's maybe dive into some of the examples so that this has a kind of practical application. So basically the primary question being asked is, do you live on a globe? If yes, then why? What are your proofs for it? We see that most people rely on certain things, images. They believe in scientists. They listen to celebrities or key opinion leaders, or they have some other testimony of other people. They can all be summarized and brought together under the blanket there, trust in authority and credentials. So they have beliefs and convictions that come about through a trust in authority or in other people, or in people who they feel have better qualifications than them. Now, generally speaking, once that primary question, then we have the three supplementary questions here to move the people in a cycle of inquiry. It can be also very helpful to inform people about certain things, or ask if they understand, for example, the difference between natural and formal science. If I go to the definition of a natural science, then you can see that things need to be observable, testable, repeatable, scalable. There needs to be an agreement on self-evident truths and first principles, and that's a topic that we will probably go into in more detail in the future. There's also the topic that we have a natural language, which is our own constitution, if you like. It's our hardwired nature, and a whole bunch of common senses that we all use and experience daily, and that we all have. Now, these common senses bring sensations and perceptions to the mind, and there's also a whole bunch of other things that belong to our natural language and our natural constitution. Things like the credulity and veracity, we speak the truth, or credulity that we believe what other people say. And also the whole thing that, when your children come to the world, they have certain morals and values. Just to take an example, if you put a rabbit and an apple next to a child, she'll eat, or she will eat the apple and play with the rabbit, and not the other way around. So we come with, how should I say, certain hardwired senses and perceptions, and with certain morals, and, if you like, laws like credulity and veracity. An example of a natural science, or an attribute of natural science would be water, where we know it has an absolute uniform, constant natural property and behavior. And we also know that it's a proven, undeniable fact of lived life. So, if I look at exactly how we live life, then, the earth is 80% water, our bodies are 80% water. Water is everywhere in our daily life: straws, cups, bowls, basins. you can all read what's written there, so that it's obvious that water is a part of nature, and it's a part of what we're made up of, and what we live by. Now, there's a lot more information and inquiry, I think, in the whole subject of water than gives credit for it. But we're not going to go there at this moment in time. What are the uniform, constant natural properties and behaviours? Well, yeah, it has to be contained. It's level. You can get it flowing with a directed flow or with a motive action, and get it moving through pipes and tubes and aqueducts and everything, and there'll be different temperatures and pressures, so we can direct its flow. We can control it, contain it, and move it. Generally speaking, if we don't do that, then it's kind of in free fall flow, and it's seeking its level. So we know water has to be contained. We know it has uniform, constant properties, and we also know that we have it in daily life, that we can't do without it. It's also 100% scalable, as is obvious by cups, baths, swimming pools, lakes, ponds, etc. So that's a natural science: observable, testable, repeatable, and scalable. Now, a formal science is different. A formal science is more around having theories which you can calculate and predict things. And again, there's a whole topic here of what does that actually mean, which would go too far at the moment. But it's basically based on definitions, axioms, and people go from assumptions to models, and then try to calculate and predict. But it's theory, This is theory because it's based on definitions and maximums. It's an artificial language. It's man-made. Standards and norms are defined. Certain universal ideas are assumed. And another very important point about the object of measurement, and what measurement actually means. It suits the purpose of the intended measurement when you define certain axioms where you want to do things. And again, that's a topic we'll go into in more detail in another video. So an example of a formal science is mathematics. And there's always this idea that mathematics proves things, but mathematics actually doesn't prove anything. And again, both of these topics are things that will be dived into in another video in more detail. So we'll leave them there for the moment. I'm not very versed in social sciences, so I'm just going to skip over this one. The main thing is that people understand the difference between natural and formal sciences, between things that are defined by nature, are part of a reality, and things that are formally described or man-made to suit intended purposes of something or other. Generally speaking, when we're talking about this subject, at least, it's about measuring. Now, after having, if you like, asked the primary question, then it could also be necessary then to inform the people about the sciences, or maybe give them a quick overview of what it actually means to deny reality. Dell's example is a wonderful one. Do you believe in pink unicorns? Yes, show me please. No, sorry, I can't, but believe me anyway. Should I believe? No, of course you bloody well shouldn't. And that's a very good example that if things are not possible to be seen, touched, smelled, tasted, or heard, then it's not part of reality. It's a belief. It's a conviction. And the question is, where does these come from, and how to get rid of them? So when we dive in then to the further questions like, does water conform to the exterior of a shape? Then generally speaking, we're asking people, do you have a practical example of this? The general answer is, of course, no. And then we can obviously provide various counterexamples, like, water takes the shapes of its container. If you put a shape or a form or a body into water, then the water does not conform around it. You can't see it. So that, if you like, we're showing the people that this is a contradiction to their natural reality, and cycling around that question gets them back to, well, can vast oceans conform to a sphere? The answer might be then, I don't know. So we basically go back to the primary question. Maybe we then have to inform the people, as I've done here on the right-hand side. Do you know the sciences? Or inform them again of what reality denial actually means. A second question in the cycle is the one around, can opposing pressure systems exist side by side without a solid barrier? Again, this leads to absurdities and contradictions, because there are no practical examples that can be shown of this taking place, although that's what we're told is happening, that there is a space, a vacuum, and that the Earth is basically covered by a pressurized system that's being held in by a fictional theoretical force called gravity. But there are no practical examples. Again, we have counterexamples. We have gas canisters, tubes, pipes, and this space vacuum, obviously, that I've just mentioned, is, if you like, the absurdity in what we're being told. Another example is the ones around measurable curvature. Again, this idea that curvature can be seen with the naked eye, or when you rise up in a certain altitude, then it becomes visible. It again might be necessary here to inform people about what perspective means, to dive in maybe with another example of railways or horizons, or how the eye functions, what a vanishing point is, what convergence is. Because if people don't understand perspective, then obviously they can be easily hoodwinked with the old thing that, a ship goes over the curve of the ocean. There's other contradictions. The ship over the horizon, the very fact that you can bring it back with camera zooms and telescopes, or the contradiction that they always only talk about the ship going over the curve in front of you or behind you, yet from side to side you can see many more miles, which again leads to things like we're living on a cylinder or a saddle shape or whatever these nonsense things are. So basically these three questions are examples of how to guide people around the cycle, make them understand that they have a trust in authority, and that it must be a belief, that it makes sure they understand the distinction between natural and formal sciences, give an absurd example of reality denial, which is understandable by anybody, and then guide them through the three main questions, always cycling back. And of course, at the end of the day, we want to ask again, do you still believe you live on a globe? If yes, then why? And hopefully by that time, the people have understood that that they thought they knew, and they didn't want to think about it, but now they do want to think about it, and they go away inquiring and wanting to learn more.